Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Miracle Sims, and you're watching the GSL Talk Show. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with Mr. Bill LaMorey, and we may even learn what Marilyn Manson was like before the fame. So stay tuned.
It's a miracle, baby. Shout you. Miracle Sims, let's go. Yeah. It's a miracle, baby. Shout you. Miracle Sims.
But I'm not the type of girl that goes.
Yeah. It's a miracle, baby. Shout
You wishing I would have a one night affair.
Welcome back to the GSL Talk Show. I'm here with Mr. Bill LaMorey. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Miracle. How are you? Thanks so much for having me on your show.
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to have you here as well. So, I'd love to learn more about you and your endeavors. So, let's start with where you're from. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born in Norwich, Connecticut, and I've lived actually half my life in Connecticut and half in Florida. But when I was about 9, my family moved to South Florida, so I grew up in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area.
Hmm.
And then in 2005, went back to my home state to start a church in West Hartford, Connecticut. Shout out to 180 Life Church, who's still there, still doing awesome.
Nice.
And then, almost 2 years ago, year and a half ago, we transitioned back to Florida. But now I'm living on the Gulf Coast, the quieter coast, out in Sarasota.
Wow, nice. Like, so you got a little bit of the north and the south, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick with.
So the funny thing is, I am Florida man, but I'm also New England man. So I
Uh,
get all the Florida man jokes, and there's sort of that side of things which I can enter that world, but I can also enter the world of New England and know what that's like. It's like I know how to navigate both places. Love both places, quirks and all. Yeah, it's definitely shaped part of who I am.
oh, that's awesome, man. I don't think I've been to Connecticut yet. I know it's so funny. My husband and I was talking about Boston the other day. He's like, "Oh, those people there, he had his perspective football wise and stuff." So I'm like, "Oh, But yeah,
Well,
I mean,
Boston's a unique group of characters, but there's a so the funny thing is a lot of people think New Englanders are rough and tumble, or maybe mean or cold or standoffish, and they're different. But once you get to know them, they're awesome. The way I like to say it is, a lot of times New Englanders are the kind of people, they might be slow to kind of bring you in, but once you're in, they'll go back for you. They'll go out for you. Whereas some places, sometimes some people, they're quick to say, "Yeah, I love you, brother, sister," and they're kind of flaky and it's like shallow. So I feel like it's kind of a different depth and a different perspective. And the time to go is coming up soon. Is summer when you're in Georgia, right?
I am.
Okay, so when you're sweltering in the Georgia heat, I'm sweltering in the Florida heat in the summertime. New England has the best summers you could possibly imagine. Lots of great coastal towns, cooler for sure. Absolute. That's the time. Probably not January. Probably not the best time to visit there. Freezing snow, but summertime's hard to beat.
Oh wow, yeah, your description of the people kind of reminded me of I was a theater kid, I guess you would say. Well, kinda. It was in me, but we didn't really have the programs. But anyway, that's a whole thing. Me and my backstory. But I was reminded of the Music Man in Iowa Stubborn. Like, how close is it to Iowa?
It's fun.
It sounds like the same type of thing that's in that song that was in the Music Man. But anyway, well, also it's great to learn a little bit more about, like, where you're from and how it has shaped you thus far, and obviously it's had led you on this path, or excuse me, this path of ministry and whatnot. So I mean, tell us about that. How did you get into ministry work and opening up a church? You said.
Yeah, so man, it starts way before that. So, when I was about 11, my mom came to faith in Christ, started going to a church. And after a few years, I really went pretty far down the prodigal road and into a life of drug addiction. Was
Mm.
just hanging out with the heavy metal crowd, friends with the guys from Marilyn Manson, who were a local band back then, hanging out with those guys. and just kind of went kind of off the deep end. God radically, and then through, through brokenness is often the place that God reaches you. And what I like to call the modern day belly of the whale, jail.
Mm.
God really kind of connected me into that place. And my mom was great because she's a single mom, and I'm her only child, and so it was a tough road for her. But she finally learned to have a little bit of tough love and said, "I'm not going to bond you out until you go into this program." And it was a Christian
Mm.
ministry called Calvary House in Fort Lauderdale. Still there, still doing awesome. And it's in that place. And it took me a little bit because I'm a stubborn guy. I ended up getting kicked out 3 times, but I eventually graduated from there and started moving on a path in business. Became an operations manager, was working at a company, but taking Bible college classes. I didn't know why. And then 4.5 years after I graduated from Calvary House, I got asked to be the director of that place, which is a wild thing. And it's kind of a pattern that God does in my life. I love to see when he does it in other people's lives, like circles of redemption, where he takes you back to a place of brokenness and then redeems it in a super cool way. He did
Mm.
that a few years after I got the privilege of being the director of that ministry. He took me down to Miami, where my former pharmaceutical distributors were. Again, redeemed a broken place. And that's where I started working as a pastor, as an administrative pastor for a friend. And I told him I'll give you a 2-year commitment because I did sense that God was probably calling me to start a church at some point. And after that time had kind of ended, I did seek and pray. And in 2005, we moved out to start a church in my home state of Connecticut. New England is very much postmodern, post-Christian, kind of like not unlike Georgia, unlike Florida. It's not as vibrant spiritually. It's harder in a lot of ways for churches, but we sense that's where God was calling us. God did an amazing thing out there. Just blew our minds with the people that he brought together. What a great group of people. It was, we had a very diverse church, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic, and just from all different places. And it was just a beautiful picture of Christ that he brought so many people together and rallied around him. And it's I think there's lots of reasons God just decides to do cool things sometimes. But for us, one of the things that we often attribute it to is we wanted to just welcome every single person that walked through the door, regardless of their past. And I think my past, coming from places of brokenness, helps you kind of position yourself to be ready for people like that. But also another decision, I have no idea where you stand or your listeners stand on this, but we decided that our church was going to be completely apolitical, that we felt a redemption center for Jesus is one where Democrats and Republicans could come together around the table of Jesus, and they might fight on Twitter or X or whatever it is. But in church, we're going to come together. We're going to love Jesus, and we're not going to be about that. Now, of course, as you go out, your faith should impact how you vote, and maybe you're in politics, whatever the case is. But we just wanted to create a space where that wasn't one more divisive thing, just pulling people apart. We felt that was important. And so God blessed it. And in 2020, by the way, I know that's when you started your podcast. Congratulations on that. It was a tough year for a lot of people, for everybody, but especially if you were in leadership. It was tough because you're navigating through difficult things like COVID, and people are afraid, people are upset, people are losing all kinds of loved ones, losing jobs. Like there's a lot of fear in the air. On top of that, we had people fighting over mask or no mask, vax or no mask. Then we had George Floyd. Then we had Biden versus Trump. So it was like a year of chaos, a year of division and infighting. So, and we as a church were kicked out of where we met for a year. So we were portable, kind of marching all over the place because the restrictions were pretty strict up in the Northeast, so, and other places. So end of the year, we, and I think it's probably just important to tell you kind of how we ended and transitioned back to Florida is my wife had seasonal affective disorder. You probably don't know about that being in Georgia, but it's like a winter depression, and it got super terrible over the years. And then I think just with 2020 and all the things going on, combined with that, she just had a complete mental, emotional breakdown in December of 2020. And so I sent her down to Florida where her parents live. And I came a couple weeks later to check in on her, and she was doing amazing. So I realized, like, I can't keep my wife in this for much longer, but it was a challenge of, we've got this church that's up north. This is our people. What do we do? So I moved my family in 2021 back to Florida, where we are now. And then for 2 years, I was flying back and forth until we could get the church like basically 3 out of 4 weekends till we could get the church back to a place of health and strength and find someone to kind of take over, which that
Wow.
happened September 2023. And so preached my last service there, and then came down here. And then now we're trying to figure out what God has to do, wants us to do for the rest of our lives. Great, I should point out, great update. My wife's doing fantastic. So worth it. Love her, and thankful for her doing amazing. The church is doing fantastic. Josh is doing a great job up there. The community is still doing awesome things. And so that's an encouraging thing. And, you know, for me, it's like, now, well, what do you do starting over when you haven't planned to start over? It's the thing a lot of people have to deal with in career and like midlife, and like, well, I had planned to retire from there, but sometimes God's plans are not our plans. And so that's something we've tried to figure out. And in the meantime, and I'm going to take a breath in a minute, but in the meantime, we're trying to figure out what that is. And so he's given us productive things, like I'm currently coaching and consulting with the church, kind of helping work with them, which I'm enjoying. And in the meantime, I've also written this book that I had the title of for almost 20 years. I had a heart, and then in a mountaintop literally experience in Montana last year, God gave me the vision for the contents of what that would be. And then so I had this extra time, so I feverishly wrote, showed up daily, and poured myself in, poured my soul out. And that book just came out last week as of this recording. So excited about that. And I have no idea what God's going to do with it. It's just, it wasn't like God promised, do this and it'll be New York Times bestseller. It was more like, do this and I'm going to use it. And I've already heard some amazing feedback of how he's using it. So to me, that's super encouraging. But that's me in a nutshell of ministry, entering the ministry, kind of exiting to the bus stop that I'm at now, if you will, and then figuring out, looking in a season of trying to figure out what's next with anticipation, I guess, and curiosity.
Man, well, I mean, what an amazing, like they say, full life, it sounds like. I mean, I'm not trying to say you're done at all by any means. It sounds like you're just at a pit stop moment. But I mean, it sounds amazingly full journey that you've already experienced, which is really, really cool. I mean, I know we gotta, I guess, go back to the beginning, because you did kind of drop something, which I know people may be like, oh, they may get you talking about this a long time or something, but you don't have to. But I think you just kind of sprinkled in there, like, oh, by the way, I knew Marilyn Manson's people. Like, that's kind of, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because I would like to, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they were probably in a different space or whatever, being as they were coming up at that particular time. But obviously, you're hanging out with them. I don't know if it was directly them that influenced you, but that type of crowd, right, sent you down a path that you feel as if wasn't obviously, I guess, wasn't the best path. You ended up in jail, all these different things that you experienced. And so, I know a lot of people talk about, I guess, that particular movement, or it's like one of those things when people think demonic, or when people think, dark and stuff like that, they think about that type of goth or that type of dress, or those type of things is usually what comes to people's minds, versus what the Bible say, which is like an angel of light, or the positive which could be the true demonic thing as well. So I'm not saying that both can be, as well as, anyway, I guess my point of bringing that back up is, like, do you have anything to share and say about that particular time in your life, and knowing them even before they became what they became? But like, I don't know, is there anything you want to share about the influence or that particular time to hopefully encourage and inspire people?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was huge into punk rock, heavy metal, and all that. And so I was at a concert in South Beach, Miami, at a Ramones concert. And then after the concert, I met this tall, skinny guy handing out flyers for his first concert coming up, and it was Brian, aka Marilyn Manson. And it's funny. This is pre-internet, because this is early '90s, and so he figured out how to get buzz and how to really get people talking about him and his band early on, and he was smart about it. So he gave me a flyer, and I called the next day. He he called me back and he asked for my address, which I'm like, ooh, what's this all about? And so I just gave it to him, and he calls me a few hours later and he says, go to the cemetery across the street from where you live. And I was like, okay. And he says, like, go 3 rows back, 6 graves across, whatever it is. And I did, because it was the day. And he left something for me, and it was a bag, and it had like a decapitated Barbie doll head. It had clippings of serial killer stories and newspaper articles. And at the very bottom, it had his first ever demo tape that they had recorded. And so it was a situation where I'm like, wow. So, and I listened to it, and it was a fusion of metal, industrial, punk, a lot of things that I enjoyed listening to. And it was, I was kind of hooked right away, and became friends with those guys right away. Yeah, sorry, my screensaver came on there, so I don't know what sure what that's about. But anyway, I became friends with these guys right away, and started hanging out with Brian, the singer, quite a bit. But it wasn't really he, because I know that he later had addiction issues, and he's, from what I understand, sober now. But he wasn't really using hard drugs at the time, but he embraced the image of it for shock value. By the way, Satanism was something he used for the shock value. It wasn't like he worshiped the devil. It was all shock. And I even get into in my book some of the other things with that. But the person that did end up doing drugs with was Gidget, the bass player. He and I had known him before, and he was just a guy. He just looked like a rock star. You knew he was destined to be a rock star. Just had the look, and a lot of the image of the band they really got from him. That kind of morphed over. And it was when I started hanging out more with him that I got into heroin, cocaine, other drugs, kind of moving down that path. And what just to talk about kind of the other side of it, when I did finally get clean, I did get the opportunity. I have not spoken to Marilyn or the rest of the guys in more than 30 years since they've gone on and become famous and all that. But Brad, a few years later, he actually got kicked out of the band because he recorded the first album, then got kicked out because of his drug abuse. Was to the point where they couldn't have him in the band anymore. And I actually had become a Christian by this time, looked square by this time, had a wife, got married, and so I invited him to church with me. And he came, and we got done. We went out to dinner that night. He says, "Bill, I'm so happy for you. You look happy. You look different. It's great." He's like, "But that's just not for me." And we stayed in touch. And I said, "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." And I prayed for him. Sadly, a few years later, in LA, he died of a heroin overdose, found with a needle in his arm. And it's just one of those things where I look at, and God's grace has been with me the entire time. I've seen lots of people I love broken, dead, jailed, and it's why God chose to kind of snatch me out of the fire and pull me out. I don't know, but I do know that since He did, it's my responsibility as a response, as I think, a loving response, to just say, "Hey, I want to shine for you and share the story that you've given me." And it's kind of funny, when I wrote this book, I was like, I wanted to help people move from places of brokenness to redemption and transformation. But I'm like, I don't have like a degree in neuroscience. I'm not like one of these, I'm not trained as a counselor. Like, what do I have? And God just kind of kept telling me, "You've got this story. It's a unique story. It's kind of a cool and wild story." As I put in the subtitle of my book, it's a beautiful, gritty story. And it's kind of this thing that I can offer to share how God can take anyone basically from any place of brokenness and move you on a path of redemption and transformation. Doesn't mean everything's sunshine and roses, doesn't mean everything's perfect along the way, but it does mean that purpose can come out of hopelessness. It does mean that God can take a crooked path and make it straight again. It does mean that God can do things in your life that you never would have asked, thought, or imagined. And so that's kind of what I hope to testify to with my story and encourage other people. What about your story? Because in my book and in my story, I try to encourage you. Well, you may not be able to relate to drugs. You probably didn't hang out with Marilyn Manson, but you have things in your life that may be broken in some way that if you put in God's hands, he can do something with, and he can take your story then, and that can become an example to other people to inspire, encourage, and bring hope to them. So that's kind of the heart in getting it all out there.
I mean, makes sense. Makes sense. Who knew that? You know, that would come with the one question about. And I mean, their marketing tactics is definitely I don't know. That's very interesting. You said addresses and being able to just go across the street and find something left for you, but even all of that is for me, I think it's just very. I don't even know what to say right now. Like, because I've been in this since 2020. I think my eyes and my ears have just been so exposed and so open to. Who knows? Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist at this point. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's exactly what you described. You know, but I say all that to say that thank God, you know, that you were able to get on the other side, right? That you were able to get through, you know, continue to live, right? And to then get to the place where you are today. Because it seems like from even what the little bit that we've heard thus far, I mean, obviously you have made a great impact in a variety of ways and God has used you to do those things. And then even with you just sharing that part of the testimony, you know, it kind of shows what happens to those that choose the opposite, right? Those that, you know, they hear the call, they get the warnings, they get the invitation, right, to come to church or whatever the case may be, and then, you know, and ultimately choosing saying it's not for me and going their own way. That was sad to hear and whatnot, but we know that again the impact. I think one of the things I'm learning these days is like I can only do so much when it comes to other people, right? I can do my best, right? But I can't do it for them and stuff like that. And so I'm learning to be okay with that, even though I mean the Bible talks about God hopes or wants none of us to be lost in this type of situation. But unfortunately, you know, with us having the free will and the choice and all that, I mean, that these are the results that we, you know, end up with. And so to me, hearing again your testimony is clearly showing a hey, two crossroad moments, you know, that you had in your life. You know, you could have just been like, okay, mom, yeah, I'll go to that program, and then just brushed it off or never did anything. You know what I mean? Like you had all those choices and options, but you know, you decided to continue to follow the Lord from what I'm hearing, right? And He's using you in a great, mighty way. And now you've written this book and things of that nature. And so, and who knows? Like again, this is just a pit stop for you. So we know there's more things to come. Who knows, man? And so I mean, so the book itself, can you tell us the title and maybe a little more about like maybe not everything, but you can give us like a little glimpse into uh, what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So it is called The Rest of the Man Show. And as the
Mm,
subtitle, it's a beautiful, gritty story and guide to bring new life to your soul. So
mm,
let me tell you where how I got the title is funny because like what's that about? So I was in church. I had just done a service. This was like over 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I did a service and a woman came up to me and she said, "Hey, I'm only here because my neighbor's daughter was being dedicated today, so I came."
mm,
So that's her reason. But the
mm,
very first thing she said to me, she walks up and says, "Hi, I bat for the other team." I said, "Okay," so I didn't know where this was going to go. But then she
mm.
says, "I'm Jewish," which is not at all what I expected when she said that.
You
But
know,
then,
yeah.
right, I didn't expect. But then she says, "Hey, I came because my neighbor's daughter was being dedicated." And then she goes on to say, "I went to leave right after the dedication part. And then my son, who is 4 years old, grabbed my arm and said, 'Wait, mommy, I want to stay and see the rest of the man show.'" And so I laughed, and then she said, "Hey, he repeated all your main points, and so he learned what you had to say." I was like, "Wow!" And she's like, "I just want to give you credit because to keep a 4-year-old's attention, that's something else." I said, "Well, you know, it's my level, right? Whatever." But put all kidding aside, that when I heard that, I was like, "That's a great book title." So I just wrote that
Mm,
down, and for
mm,
many years, I was like, I didn't know what to do with it. And then again, that mountaintop experience, God gave me a vision to kind of share and help people. And there's 3 moves in the book. I call them acts. Act 1 is brokenness. Act 2
mm,
is redemption. And Act 3 is transformation. Act 1 and 2 is about the first half of the book, and then Act 3 is the second half of the book. Act 1 and 2, I share my story, but it's not like a biography. It's not a memoir. It's more of my story in themes of brokenness first in Act 1 that people can relate to, because maybe they don't have addiction, or they don't have issues with jail, but maybe I get into things like, what does it mean to have shame, or even body shame? What does it mean to have depression? What does it mean to kind of go through growing up in broken home without a dad? Like a lot of things that maybe people can relate to. And as I try to guide them in first act, it doesn't matter if you've gone through the same specific things. You have some areas of brokenness. So I'm trying to draw that out of the reader. In Act 2, I move on to the redemption themes, how God redeemed my work, my family, my just all different areas, friends. And then I kind of talk through, and again, I'm trying to draw the reader to say, where has God redeemed areas of your life? Or where are you hoping for areas of redemption, for God to work in these areas? And the whole time I'm trying to draw your story out, even as I'm sharing mine and themes. And then in Act 3 is where it gets real practical. I get into practices of healing and transformation to go to the next level. And so a lot of the things that were brought up in the first half of the book, we talk, well, what do you do with it? Like, how do you make sense of suffering? How do you deal with toxic shame? How do you deal with temptation? And just a whole bunch of different practices. How do you grow spiritually? Friends, how do you choose the right friends? And so it's just a lot of practical things. And the second half of the book is something that you could almost use as a field guide, if you will, towards growth and transformation. If you're like, hey, I'm in a place of brokenness, I want to move to redemption. Well, here are some of the practices. And the way I look at it is, yes, Act 1 and 2 is more chronological, but when you get to Act 3, you could almost pick like, well, which of these most connects with me and what I want to do right now? Like, oh, failing forward, what does that mean? Oh, I need to deal with grief. Oh, I need to deal with forgiving people, or I need to learn with processing things in my life instead of just keep moving forward and never dealing with the things that are going on in my head and in my heart. So that's kind of a summary of the book. And I really wrote it for, I wanted Christians to go deeper, because I think that what happened is when I came to church and when I was broken, I just assumed everyone else, I was this one screwed up person who had made a mess of their life, and everyone else was perfect, pretty around me. Came to realize that everyone else is just as jacked up as I am, is just in different areas, and they don't get pushed towards the broken extremes like someone who's been on my path has, because it's a lot easier to hide and mask and gloss over other issues that people might have if it's not like drugs or alcohol that are pushing you kind of to the brink. And so what my heart was to help people really deal with that instead of glossing it over, bring it before God, move to places of redemption, and then help people go deeper. Because I feel, the way I like to say this, I feel like people are leaving money on the table when it comes to Christ. Like Jesus said, I came to give you abundant life. This is not a prosperity diet. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about abundant soul, abundant living, and healing and transformation. And sometimes we settle for, well, I got my get out of hell free card, and I have eternity secured in heaven with Jesus. But he wants to change how you live right now, and he wants to free you. He wants to heal you. He wants to do new things. So I want that for Christians, but I also wrote it for non-Christians, because I know what it was like to go through there. Even in first act of brokenness, I deal with my struggles with God and church and the hypocrisies and the things I saw that kept me from faith for a long time, and kind of how I navigated through some of those things. So I wanted a book that people that were wanting healing, that maybe feel broken, and in that place, could find some hope. Even I'm going to talk about God. I mean, it's part of who I am, but I want to invite you in. I don't want to beat you over the head with it. I want to help pull you along and say, for your consideration, and lay out sort of my case, if you will. And that's the heart. And the great confirmation, or a confirmation I got, is even today, someone I know, and I won't identify this person, but they've known me because they were interested in my days with Manson and hanging out with them, and they've stayed connected to me for a long time. Not a Christian, but sent me a message today saying how much they're loving the book, and that how they needed it right now. And it's bringing the way it was expressed, positive energy, which is great. I hope what it's bringing is Christ and that awareness to them. So for me, that's good. If I can help the Christian go deeper in their faith, but also the person that hasn't become a believer, if I can maybe expose some things and point some things to them and share the hope that I found, so that maybe they'll be open towards their redemption, towards their transformation in Jesus, then that's the heart. And we'll see if I've been able to successfully thread the needle of kind of hitting both sides of that. I know it's not always easy to write to more than one target, but that was at least the hope.
Hey, well, I mean, I think that's amazing. Like, honestly, I know for sure your book is definitely needed in a lot of different people, a lot of different situations, even all the things you already named. There's a lot of depression happening these days, mental, all kinds of things going on where people are trying to either ignore it or not deal with it, or they're trying to deal with it, but they're dealing with it alone. They're not dealing with the Lord, so then they don't know how to, navigate all those different things. And so it sounds like your book is addressing all those things. And I couldn't help but smile and think, like, man, how creative. Well, yes, are you, because you are the author of the book, and I love that you got the acts with the show and all the things. It sounds amazing. I get that whole thing because again, my background is in theater, so I'm like, I get it, the razzle dazzle of it all. But also, I couldn't help but think about how creative God is, right? To use the little boy, use all the things to like get to this place to hopefully encourage and inspire whoever, again, gets your book. So it's always amazing to see and hear people's testimonies and stuff. And I'm excited for you, man. Like, I know, again, we talked about you being at this particular, I guess, I keep saying pit stop, you know what I'm saying? You've been at this pit stop in your life, and you're like, oh, what's next, And I know I take some time every now and then to think about like the things I was doing, and Google is good, right, at reminding you, like sending you all your photos from like years ago and stuff. And so
Sure.
I'm looking at like 14 years ago or 7 years ago, or all this type of stuff, and you're like, oh man, it didn't feel like it was that long, especially like my life since I became married and a mom and all this type of stuff. It seems like it just was yesterday that me and my husband just met or something, even though it's been like almost 9 years of marriage now, but I guess I bring up all that to say, like, there's these different moments in our life where, the things I'm doing now, I think I had a glimpse of it, or I think I had like maybe some small idea of some of what I'm doing, but some things I'm doing now is not necessarily what I thought I would be doing, if that makes any sense. Like, but I feel like I'm walking in my purpose. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like I'm way more content now than I probably ever have been in my life. And especially with like when it comes to work and where God has me and the things He has me doing. Now, for me, I feel like the more I surrender to the Lord and say, well, okay, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? Then these doors and opportunities and stuff opened up for me, or He just plopped me where He wanted me to be and stuff like that. And I just learned to be okay with it and stuff. But I guess I bring it up to say, like, with you being in this particular moment of, I guess, transition or something like that, like, how are you feeling about it? Are you feeling optimistic? I know it was very interesting too when you said earlier about like what am I going to do with the rest of my life type of thing. And so, like, do you have an idea, or are you in a place of like just kind of like letting God lead and or are you confused? Like, I don't know, like where are you with your current situation? And then also, what's the best thing that's going to help people? Well, yeah, do you have anything to say to people in like a similar situation? Because I know sometimes there's a lot of people, and I try to help people, but it can be difficult trying to help people sometimes. But anyway, sometimes people are in situations where they like either they feel like they're in loop, right? They're doing the same things over and over again, or they feel like, I'm here and I want this or that, but I can't get there and or whatever. And so, if you are at peace, like, what can you tell that person to help them get at peace? And because I know what I would say, but sometimes people need other people to, to say, yeah, about these type of things. So.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a good question. I think that so waiting is a hard thing. in life. Like everybody's waiting on something. Like I
Mhm.
remember I listened to one of your previous talks where your guest and you talked about when you're waiting, for example, on your partner, when you're going to get, that's a hard wait. When you're waiting on a career thing, or sometimes for parents, when are we going to have kids, or whatever, or later in life, when are the kids going to move out? There's lots of different things that you wait on in life that are hard. And for me, it is, waiting is a place of testing. I liken it to the wilderness period where God is trying to refine you. Yet in the
Mm,
wilderness, he's not punishing you. He's providing for you, whether it's water from the rock or it's manna from heaven or quail or
mm,
whatever it is, he's providing for you. Now, you want to get to the destination, and sometimes you long to get back to where you were beforehand, but the journey is part of what God's doing in you. And I wish I remember that movie Click. I'm saying, I wish I
mm,
could fast forward some parts and just kind of get to the action, get to the next step. But I
mm,
think that God has something for me, and maybe that's what I'd share for everyone else that is waiting, is that God has something for you in the wait. And the best thing, I
mm,
can't tell you how to get out of the wait. I can tell you the best thing to do is trust that as you wait on him, he'll renew your strength like eagles. You'll mount up, you'll soar. You're going to run. You're not going to crawl. But it is hard and it is difficult. So I will share with you that some of you've asked, like, how are you doing it? Is it like confident? Some days it's fully confident. Some days I'm like, come on, God, and I'm frustrated and I'm discouraged. I'm just being real with you because I feel like
mhm,
that's what will help other people. Like when you're in those places, when you're like, I can go from one day, God's got this, he's got a great plan, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. And the next day I'm like David crying in the Psalms, why have you forsaken me? And that's just kind of the one of the things I talk in the book is how do you deal with your emotions, because there's
mm,
your thoughts that you have to get under control, there's your emotions. And I guess one of the things that has helped me a lot, and maybe this is an exercise that can help your listeners that are in the wait, is when I go through that whole chapter of redemption in Act Two, every one of those is sort of a closed loop. Here was brokenness. Here's how God redeemed that thing, and it's like, wow. All of those are basically milestones that I can look back on of faith and say,
mm,
look what God did. Look what God did.
mm,
Look what God did. And I even put in my book, but here's something that's unresolved in my life, because lest you feel like I have it all together and I'm still on a faith journey, just like you're still on a faith journey, just like we all are. And we're going to deal with some things that are hard, and we're going to deal with some things that really cause us to cry out to God, wonder if he's listening, maybe sometimes wonder if he's messing with us or
mm,
having fun up there. And yet
mm,
if you stop and look back and say, but what has God done for me? Not the least of which is sending Jesus to die for you, to live again, to offer you new life and transformation. Like that's pretty big if that's all it was, but he's done more than that. And how has he
mhm,
worked in my life and grown and transformed me? Then to say that even if it feels like I've been waiting for a long time, and it does feel like I've been waiting for a long time, that God has provided, like even in his goodness, God provided me some work to do with a consulting thing. God provided me the vision and the go to write a book. As I started doing it, like I said, it just like started bleeding out on the pages. It came. It wasn't like it was hard work like writing or any creative thing is, but it just kind of came. And so that I hope that answers your question. Is I'm in a season of curiosity and confidence mixed with emotions that come up to try to steal the joy along the way, but kind of constantly bringing myself back to what he's done in the past and even the provision that he's doing to this very day and how he provides in so many ways that are amazing. So I do believe he's got something cool ahead that I'm going to get excited about. I mean, like you said, it's like, wow, I've already lived a full life. And so part of that is like, wow, it's like, are the best things behind? And it's like, do I
mm,
dare believe that something amazing could be ahead, whatever that is? And it might be something I don't expect, it might be something I don't know. Was it working for a church? Is it working for another organization? Is it writing more books? I don't know. Like I've got thoughts and I've got ideas, but I'm trying to stay very open to the clear and direct leading, much like when I was led to plant that church. That was super clear. It was hard, but it was clear. And like when I was meant to write the book, that was clear. It took a lot of work, but it was clear. So I don't have clarity yet. So I stay waiting, and yeah, it's a process. And some days I do better than others at staying faithful in that. But God's faithful every day, and sometimes I just need to remember that.
Yes, indeed, man. I know myself, I've been on this journey this year of, I said it's going to be no expectations. Like, I didn't make a to-do list. Like, I usually make to-do lists at the beginning of the year and all these different type of things. I'm like, okay, fine, Lord. You know what I mean? Whatever you want to do. Like, I'm not even going to plan it or whatever. And he's already like showed up and showed out in these first few months. I'm like, blessing here, blessing there, reaching this goal, reaching that. I'm like, well, golly, like this thing has been on my to-do list for years to do. And this year I just did it, and it just kind of, everything just kind of came together to happen out of nowhere. But so I'm right here with you in regards to saying that, hey man, every now and then just surrendering to the Lord, right? Just allowing him to lead, allowing him to guide, and just being on the journey. And yeah, I do believe that there's great things ahead. Like, I think the enemy tries to put that in our minds, like, oh, the best things are past or whatever the case may be. But and I can't lie, man, every now and then I think about, I guess future, because for example, my father, he passed away before I was born. And so I think about, life and death and things of that nature, and thinking like, man, well, what if something happens to me, or what if, if my son has to grow up, all these type of things. There are things I think about. And that can get discouraging to think like, okay, now that I'm married, now that I have a son, now I got this, now I got that, I'm working, I'm feeling content, everything. But it's almost like, is it too good to be true? Like, when's the next shoe gonna fall? Or especially when
Right.
COVID, you talked about that earlier too. It was like so many people in our families passing away and things of that nature, and it feeling like you're just going to another funeral when like, who's next, and stuff. But again, I guess I bring up all that to say that, like, the enemy tries to use these things, I feel like, to, discourage us from understanding that, one, God has great, phenomenal things for us to do. And even if you haven't achieved them yet or whatever, I feel like if it's in your heart, in your mind, that these are things that God is letting us know that, hey, this is what I have for you, or this is what I desire for you, or if you have the desire for it, depending on what it is, depending on what it is. But like, for example, good, godly, desires or whatever the case may be, I feel like if you have the desire, then it is something for you, right? It's something that you can achieve. It's something that you can have or whatever. Like, we shouldn't limit ourselves with those thoughts. But we could probably go on and on about that in future talk, man. So I won't be on your time with that. But I do, before you go, I would love if you could touch on your marriage a little bit, because I love that you covered your wife in such a way where you were like, you noticed the issue, and you guys made the moves and things of that nature. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. It sounds like got good husband qualities and things. So I mean, help the men folk if you can. Is there anything you want to share about y'all's relationship, the journey, discovering that you just did, about the move? And I don't know, whatever you feel led to share about that, I would love to hear. And I guess from there, I'll just let you share whatever you would like to say to us. If there's anything that you want to share before you go, things of that nature, I'm all ears. I'm just gonna listen.
Uh, Thank you, Miracle. So I guess regarding marriage, that in that context, there's two things that I would say. One is that when it comes to marriage, when it comes to, a lot of times guys will say, hey, remember that women, you're called to submit to your husband, and bring that up in the Bible. It does say that he's the leader of your home, but it also says that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. What did Jesus do? Is he laid down his life for the bride. So if anyone loves you like that, you don't really have trouble following their lead if they're going to lay down their life and like die for you, put their life down for you. So I think that, first of all, I hope you don't ever quote the submission verse to your wife. Let God work with your wife on that, because it also does say submit to one another in love. So remember that but the key is to work on your role. Let the wives worry about what they need to do. Work on, are you dying sacrificially to your wife? And in that moment, and I know that I'm an only child, And so I can be selfish many times as a tendency because I grew up, and my wife even came up with a term early in our marriage, like, hey, you're only childing it. And it's like a term like, and so it's like when I'm kind of being selfish because I'm like, I never had as a kid, like, so it's like, okay, I'm only childing it. But when push came to shove, I thank God that he gave me the grace to say, well, I had thought that we were going to be here and do this church and that was our plan and our future, but we're going to lay that down for the sake of my number one ministry, which is my bride. And, years ago, I had heard a missionary in Africa speak, and he shared how he was doing good work over there, but his wife was struggling, couldn't do it anymore. And so he left his wife to keep doing that. And he actually got some applause from people, but I not from me, because I was like, that's very dishonorable that you would leave your wife to do this. Like your wife is your partner. You committed to her. God can raise up anybody to serve the people in Africa that you're serving. And called you to be the husband to your wife and her to be wife. And so I look and said, I'm glad I did that. But the hard part is managing that daily. And so I guess that's my call to the men is, how are you making the daily sacrifices? You want, at the end of the day, that like that book, Love and Respect, what women want more than anything from their husband's love, what men want from their wives is respect. You can't demand it, but you can earn it. The way you earn it is doing what Christ has called you to do for your wife, and daily sacrificing, laying yourself down, following the example of Christ, because a wife is supposed to be submitted unto the husband as the husband is submitted unto Christ. So if we're not submitted to Christ, we're not dying to ourselves, we're not really doing our part either. So you can't really expect your wife to do yours. Now, to the wife, I have a different thing that I want to share. And that is, so my wife, Rebecca, is amazing, but she's also a very private person. And so when she struggled with this seasonal affective disorder, she didn't share it with a lot of people, and she was very private. And then when we finally had to make a move, she allowed me to share her story. She doesn't get up and speak. She's not a public speaker, but she allowed me to share her story with our church. And what happened is we actually did a whole series on depression because we knew that there was a mental health crisis. People weren't talking about it. And so we did a whole series. The newspaper, the Hartford Courant, did an article on it, noticed it. And what happened is people came up and tell us that they've been struggling with, whether it's seasonal affective disorder or just various types of depression, and that they are finally opening up. We did small groups about it. People were talking about it. And so by her opening up about her brokenness and struggle, it changed the culture of the church that we were leading at that time. And it just changed people's lives. And I guess I want to say, not just to the wife, but to everybody now, if you take your brokenness, and I get there's some things you don't share with everyone, that's really, you need to seek God for. And a lot of things I share, my book is very raw, very vulnerable. I have people say, wow, I can't believe you laid yourself out there like that. But it's in the same spirit of, and I use discretion. There's a lot of things I didn't share. I want it to be God honoring. But the point is, why I went down those roads is because when I saw Rebecca just lower her guard, how it helped others be vulnerable, that's also my heart with the book. And so I guess I'd say, if you've been through brokenness and you've experienced it, don't be afraid to put your story into God's hands, because God will never waste a hurt. And so not only can he heal you, he can use your story to heal other people and to bring hope, kind of like much what you do with bringing people on your podcast and sharing their story. I appreciate you giving me the time and opportunity to share mine. But I guess that's it. No matter where you are, put your story, put your life in God's hands. He'll do a great work of healing and transformation. But then don't be surprised when he also uses it to do that same work in other people. And so from my perspective, that's a super cool thing.
Oh yeah, it definitely is, man. Well, I feel honored to have had this conversation with you. I think there's a lot of wonderful gems and knowledge and wisdom that you have shared with us today. And I mean, don't forget to tell us, like, so where should we go to get the book, and where can we find more information about you?
Yeah, thank you. So you can get the book at Amazon. It's in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. People have asked about an audiobook. I'm going to work on that soon. So that's not out yet, though, but you can get any of those formats. If you want to, if you're like, I don't know about this guy, why should I go his book? You can get a free sample. Go to my site, restofthemanshow.com. Don't forget there's 2 S's in there, restofthemanshow.com. And there's a link where you can get the free preface and introduction. Not trying to trick you. It will sign you up for my newsletter, but the first thing you will get is the first part of my book is a free PDF. And if that helps you make a decision on whether you want to check it out. But if you do, I would love your feedback. I would love it. You can communicate, my information's on the site, how you can communicate directly to me too. So hopefully we connect there or on the socials. But I'm pretty all over the internet and most of the forums. I think I even have TikTok. I just don't have it active yet because I'm not a good dancer. But we'll see. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe that's my next move, Miracle. It would be a
Hey.
miracle.
Well, look, when you do, come on back and tell us all about the updates and stuff, and let us see some of the moves. You're welcome back anytime.
All right. Thanks, Miracle. Appreciate it.
Wishing I would have a one night affair.
Thank you so much for watching the GSL Talk Show, and thank you to Mr. Bill LaMorey for joining us tonight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check out Mr. Bill's book and the rest of his endeavors. Have a good night.